Good evening and welcome. I'm Heather Gates Masudi. I'm a board member and officer of the Churchill Club, and I'm also managing director of venture capital relationships at Deloitte. Tonight, we present 4 outstanding women leaders at our 4th annual Women Tech Executive Roundtable discussion. We're fortunate to have with us Shala Ali, VP of Solutions Delivery, Microsoft IT, Robin Denholm, CFO of Juniper Networks, Lori Goller, Vice President of Human Resources and Recruiting at Facebook, and Barbara Holzefeld, Managing Director of SAP Labs North America. Margit Wenmakers from Andreessen Horowitz is not able to join us tonight, but heroically stepping in, we have the one and only Ann Windblad, co-founder and managing director of Hummer Windblad Venture Partners, here with us to lead the discussion. I also want to thank Microsoft, who has once again opened their doors to us as a host and a sponsor. Let's have a round of applause to thank Microsoft for making this program possible. Tonight's program is co-hosted by 3 other important nonprofit organizations. All of them are dedicated to advancing women professionally. They are the Anita Borg Institute, Ostia, and Witty. Representatives from each of them are here, and I encourage you to learn more about their work. Let me briefly tell you what's next at the Churchill Club. On July 18th, we present Jeff Weiner, CEO of LinkedIn, and Ari Emanuel, co-CEO of William Morris Endeavor Entertainment, in conversation with Kara Swisher of All Things D. Next, on Wednesday, July 27th, we present a breakfast program called Information Overload 2.0 with Jonathan Spira of Basics and Derek Dean of the Exeter Group in conversation with Dave Needle. Then on August 3rd, we present Inside Google's Search Office, an evening with Matt Cutts, Ben Gomes, and Amit Singhal. Danny Sullivan of Search Engine Land will moderate. A complete list of programs can be found on our website at churchillclub.org. A couple of dates to save if you can. The evening of September 15th, we present the 1st annual Churchill Club Awards to acknowledge exemplary achievements in the areas of innovation, social benefit, collaboration, and mentorship. And on September 16th, we present a day-long conference entitled Igniting Innovation and Mastering Change. Both of these outstanding events will be presented as the finale of our 25th annual anniversary celebration year. And my final announcement, you'll find Twitter codes in your printed programs. If you're tweeting tonight, please use # Churchill Club. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our moderator, Ann Windblad. Ann is a legend in the tech industry. She's also the co-founder and managing director of Hummer Windblad Venture Partners, a leading venture capital firm focused on software investing. Ann will lead the conversation tonight, but she also has license to add her own insights and observations as well. This will be Ann's 4th time moderating the Churchill Club Women Tech Exec panel, and we're extremely grateful to have her join us tonight. Please give a warm welcome to Ann Windblad.
Well, I'm happy to say that tonight we are seeing the new face of Silicon Valley and the tech industry as a whole. Lori, Shala, Barbara, and Robin all have important roles in the technology industry. Many of the decisions that are going to affect your companies, be they startups or their competitors or collaborators, are made by the women that are sitting around me. In many ways, all 4 of them represent the face of Silicon Valley in other ways. One was originally from Pakistan, one from Germany, one from Australia, and one from Los Angeles. So in more ways than one, we see exactly how the tech industry in Silicon Valley works. Because we have such great leaders here in front of you tonight, I've asked them to start out by giving us their thoughts about the state of the technology industry today. As you all know, it's a pretty exciting year for almost every company in the tech industry, and I thought I would give them each a chance to talk about their lens on innovation and the dynamics of the industry today. Shala?
Well, let me give you a perspective from an IT lens. When you look at information technology and how it enables the strategies of the organization that it serves, what we see from a Microsoft IT perspective is that we need to be in a real hurry to move Microsoft to becoming a real-time enterprise. And a real-time enterprise is an enterprise that will have information at its fingertips. You're not really looking at delays, you're not looking at latencies. What you have to do is put together the solutions that deliver real information for decisions to be made in moments, not in hours, and certainly not in days. And in order to do that, what we have to do is digitize our processes. So every company is made up of hundreds and hundreds of processes. And so what we're looking at from an MSIT perspective is to sit back and say, what are those processes? Who are the end users? How do we digitize those? And how do we then move Microsoft, which is well on the road to being a real-time enterprise, to being 100% real-time enterprise? So it's all around enabling the business. And so technology is not for technology's sake. It's about enabling an enterprise to be able to do its job better.
Yeah, so from my perspective, if I sort of talk about the industry at large from an innovation perspective, I think innovation is one of the most exciting things on the planet at this point. We need a lot of good news at the moment, given the financial world at large. And I think what will drive not only productivity, but new realms within many different industries is the innovation that can be delivered. And I think from a technology perspective, what we're doing here in the Valley, as well as in other parts of the world, is really just the beginning of what can be done. And so from my perspective, I think I have a huge amount of optimism of what we can actually deliver over time with focus and energy on different technologies that are out there. So I think from a country perspective, innovation is alive and well. But I think from a global perspective, innovation is alive and well, and I think that it will continue to be so.
Well, I think I'll look at it through a social lens, which is that, we've thought for many years that social was sort of the way of the future and the world was moving towards social. And the last 5 years or so has really been about proving that out and building the infrastructure for social around the web and in the world, and kind of helping people understand what it means for companies to design around people and for things to happen around people. And I think we're just at the point now where we'll start seeing, really a very diverse ecosystem and robust ecosystem of companies and competitors who are starting to move in the same direction and who are building on the platform. And I think the next 5 years will be largely about building engagement and value for the people who are already involved, sort of using the infrastructure over time. So, I think we'll see, while I think it's a trend that will certainly continue and is, a big part of all of our futures, I think, the way that companies will start thinking about building for social by design, rather than social as bolt-on at the end after you've developed a product, will change quite a bit. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the innovation, and I think we'll continue to see that over the next several years.
So the way we look at it is in terms of innovation that helps largely, in the business space. And but we're seeing some really interesting dynamics in the area of business software, which is I characterize it around the consumerization, the sort of convergence between consumer and business software, the convergence and the coherence that is required from that. And our industry is also characterized in a lot of consolidation. So what I mean by that is the convergence is really the kind of blurring of the lines between what you use in your private life as a consumer and the business line. So it all happens on the mobile devices where consumers interact with businesses, which then brings very different challenges in terms of how coherent processes need to be from the enterprise all the way to the consumer and how that interaction works. And there's a new generation of people coming into the businesses who then have very different requirements into kind of how
business software needs to be interacted with because they're used to, iPods and iPads and those kinds of things. And at the same time, if I look at our competitive space, 5 or 10 years ago, it was very different. And we're going through consolidation. At the same time, there's new competitors popping up. So it just makes for a very different and dynamic makeup of our industry at the moment, which is going through just a kind of game-changing stage at the moment.
So, Laura, you're in charge of people at Facebook, but everyone on this panel is in charge of people at their company, both recruiting them, managing them, motivating them. Words like enablement, empowerment, even, building your own social capability at your company. Whenever Silicon Valley is in a boom period, there is an extraordinary war for talent. Lori, talk to us about the talent that you're building at a relatively new company relative to SAP, Microsoft, or even Juniper.
Well, I think really there's always competition for the best people, and I think there always is in the Valley. And we even saw this in 2008 when it seemed on the surface like no one was hiring. There was still a lot of competition for the best people, and so I think there's, I think that's just part of the world that we live in, and it is definitely intense right now. It's been intense, I think, for a while now up here. I expect it to get worse, actually. There are a lot of startups that are kind of coming online, and I think that a lot of people have a lot of confidence in their ability to start a company, which is fantastic, but it will definitely create a lot of pressure in the short term. And I think we're at a place where we're looking for a lot of builders. We're looking for people who had startups or who would otherwise be starting a company or, have somehow shown that they have an inclination to build. And, those are people who are going to be really important in terms of driving innovation going forward. And I think, technology doesn't drive the innovation. It's the people that drive the technology that drive the innovation. So you've got to make sure that you've got those people. And lots of people are out looking for them right now.
So, Robin, are people starting to wear hoodies at Juniper?
I think there are a lot of hoodies, but in terms of the point about technology, I mean, if you boil it all down, at the end of the day, innovation is created by people. It's not a company. It's not an organization. It's not the machines themselves that are innovating, right? It's actually the people who are coming up with the ideas and then enabling them to happen, right? So I think at the end of the day, no matter what the economic climate, the talent that you have on any particular project, on any particular area that you're working on is the most critical thing. I'm the CFO talking, it's actually more critical than the money, right? So you can have less money with great people and get something done. You can't have the other way around. Lots of money with less great people and get great innovation
and great leadership within those people.
Yeah, well,
right?
I think
that's a part of what you're implying.
Yeah,
as well.
I think leadership is definitely part of that equation.
It's leadership. It's also how do you keep those employees and team members engaged and motivated as you're going through all these various cycles of the economy. How do you make sure they really stay enthusiastic about what they're doing and sort of willing to keep sinking their teeth in and going the extra mile?
Yeah. What do you look at in those resumes? So let's take Barbara and Lori. We'll get to Shala and Robin in a second. You were both brand managers at Disney, Coca-Cola. Now, Barbara, you're running SAP Labs. Lori, you're running people at Facebook. It's not exactly a straight line up the ladder. What do you look at in those resumes, and how was your career shaped to build into your roles?
So what I look at, I mean, obviously there's certain skills that are required for any role, but I look at them almost as the kind of the baseline. What I'm looking for in people is really do they have the passion and the energy to drive things? Are they willing to go the extra mile? Are they willing to drive change? Because that's something that in our industry is just a given, right? And are there people who are willing to try something new, who are willing to take some risks, and to really drive change, and who are open-minded because, and we just talked about that today actually, where we are going through a lot of changes in our industry, which also means organizations change a lot. And so what I'm always looking for is, are people open-minded about what change might come their way, and are they willing to try different things, which is something that I've experienced, along the way as well, and has that sort of open-mindedness has really worked.
So, Shala, were you looking for a job and Microsoft seemed appealing because you were working for Ginny Rometty at IBM, who might be the next CEO there? Mm-hmm. Or did Microsoft come calling? How did you jump from IBM, which is a very good company, to Microsoft?
Well, I think I actually didn't plan to join Microsoft at all. I got a call, and it was I think the fourth or fifth time Microsoft had called me in 2 years. And I thought, well, finally, I've never been to Seattle, so why don't I just go for an interview, right? And
we'll ask your daughter lately if she'd like this decision.
That's right. And so I came out for the interview, and it was grueling. I mean, the first interview actually was at 6 a.m., and we went from 6 till 6 with, a little lunch break in between, and I was treated like royalty. So, I mean, I have to admit, the shallow part of me found that very appealing, right? I mean, I was given this, there was a town car taking me from building to building and so on and so forth. But there was just one part of it that just I really didn't know if I wanted it or not until one thing happened. And that was their decisiveness. The decisiveness with which the decision was made. I was there on Friday, flew back on Saturday. The offer was in front of me on Wednesday. And I thought, I was amazed because that would not have happened at my previous company when an executive is brought in that fast. And we were finished by the following Friday, and then I had a non-compete, and they were willing to wait 6 months. And I thought, my goodness, this is a company I want to join.
Did they give you a puzzle to solve?
They did not. They did ask me some challenging questions, but they did not ask me to write any code or whatever. I actually joined in the services organization. And I've not, for me, the whole Microsoft culture is so addictive. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made. But, I think what really did it for me was the decisiveness with which that one action happened. And, of course, I could tell that there was a good fit.
So, Robin, you made the biggest leap. You crossed the entire Pacific Ocean. So, how did you get to Sun Microsystems from Toyota?
Yeah, no, I was actually with Sun in Australia for a few years, and they actually moved me to the US for 2 years in 2001. So, so I obviously can't count because I'm still here. But but that was a huge move. And from my perspective, joining Juniper was all about the culture. After the first 2 discussions, I knew it was a company that had a huge amount of focus, energy, passion about what we're doing in the networking world. The people were phenomenal in terms of every single person that I met before I joined were, as I said, passionate, enthusiastic, knew where the company was going, what needed to be done to get there, all of that sort of stuff. And also had huge aspirations. I mean, we're a company that's not just producing networking gear, we're going to change the planet with that. So and what we do, I think, is very, very important. That came through in, the first 3 conversations that I had. So, yeah, it was great.
Lori, what's the number one thing you look for in a candidate for Facebook to sort of move them on to the 6-hour or 6-day interview that Shala went through?
I hope we're not taking anyone from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., but I'm going to check when I get back. It seems really grueling. I think for me, I'm really looking for someone who has taken something that's working just fine and thought, this is working just fine, but I can make it even better, and has actually shown that they can do that. So someone who can actually, take something from this works great to, wow, this is like a step function different, and nobody kind of saw it coming. It's redefined something in some way.
How do you sense that? Is it by the personal interview? Can you read that in the resume?
It's both. It's both. It depends on the person and what they've been doing and where they've been. And, I think there are some markers, like they've started a company or they've, run certain things within larger organizations. And then, I often ask that question in an interview.
And how do you make sure the cultural fit's there? I mean, particularly with a younger company, I'm sure there are stated norms in the culture and making sure that you don't dilute that. How do you make sure that happens?
So I think this is actually a big part of our culture, being able to build and to think ahead and to think forward and to try something different. And usually sort of if they've shown that they can do that in the past, or it's a passion of theirs, or it's something that they're interested in, they're probably going to be a pretty good culture fit. If they're sort of the kind of person who's always tinkering, or, is building an app on the side, or just launched their own iPhone app, or, sort of someone who is always just involved in making something better is a pretty good fit, I think, for what we're looking for.
So how do you all think we're doing on this diversity challenge? Shala?
So when you look at it from a representation of women in the industry?
So from your lens.
That's right. So in my personal opinion, I think we've been at
That would
this.
be Microsoft.
Yes, and yeah, from a Microsoft perspective, and I've been working on women's issues all of my life, and I actually thought that we would be in a slightly better position today than when I go back to the 80s, and we were setting up women's conferences, and so when I look at the Fortune 500, and we often talk about the numbers, and certainly the numbers are way better than they used to be. But I think what I think we need to do is slightly adjust, and and we're certainly doing this at Microsoft as well, the way we approach the whole issue, if that's what we call it. We're still approaching it with old tools. And I don't think we've made as much advancement with the old tools, which may not be as relevant. And let me give you an example of exactly what I'm talking about. As the new generation comes into the workforce, I don't think they have as many gaps as some would imagine in terms of skill gaps. So you'll hear and you'll read articles. I just read one in the New York Times the other day which said, well, women don't ask for things. They need to ask for things. Or women aren't ambitious. They need to be a little more ambitious. And I think the insinuation there really is, if only they would fix a few of those things, the problem would get fixed. And my perspective is, we have to stop trying to fix the women. We need to fix the system. Because the women don't need fixing. And by the way, there are lots of women who are not ambitious, and there are lots of men who are not ambitious. There are lots of women who don't speak up. There are lots of men who don't speak up. This is not unique to just the female gender. What it does, in my opinion, also is have us focus on the wrong set of issues, which is trying to fix the skill gap. And I don't think that skill gap or the soft skill gap, the lack of ambition or whatever, is really that relevant. It is the systemic barriers that we need to apply ourselves to. And that's certainly what we're looking at Microsoft as well. So, it's been good to have the conferences where you sort of focus on having your voice heard at the table and so on, but we need to focus on the systemic aspects. And so stop fixing the women, fix the system.
I think one thing I'd like to see change is I'd like to see more women in engineering programs in colleges. The numbers actually here are really disheartening. So I think we're at about, don't quote me on this, I might get it a little bit wrong, but I think we're at about 18% now across the nation in the US.
Yes, we are.
And in 1985, it was about 35%. So not only has it not moved, it's gone drastically in the wrong direction. So, if you think about sort of where the biggest pool is and where you can draw from, it's getting smaller.
So do you think that's an international phenomenon as well?
I know it's a U.S. number. I don't know what's
actually
happening
it is.
as much
Yeah,
abroad.
it is. It doesn't look that different in Germany, for example, where I just think the question is, what can we do about it, to your point, in terms of can we, reach out more to the people who are in school at the moment to kind of make them aware of what opportunities lie ahead for them and how to capture them, how to go after them. I liked your point about, let's not fix the women. What we've seen work is also this, it's much less about the conversation just amongst the women. It's much more the dialogue in the organization and sort of opening the eyes to also different skill sets that are on the table and the kind of increasing importance of some of those sort of more relationship skills. And I think there's still a long way to go, but I don't think it can be a quick fix. It's much more a matter of how can we, on the one side, raise the awareness for the dialogue within the current organization and current generation, while at the same time reaching out to the younger generation and sort of talking about kind of what it takes and, you know, how could they capitalize on some of the opportunities and encourage more females to go into more technology-centric roles and studies.
So let me ask a question of the panel here then. You know, we talk a lot about, in many forums where, you know, I speak about the lack of enrollment in computer science and the fact that it is, in fact, shrinking worldwide. But from a technology perspective, do you really need a computer science background today to be in the technology industry? I mean, I often sit back and assess my own team and say, how many have a business degree? How many have a liberal arts degree? And it's not the same as assembler code. Right? I mean, I don't even know how many in the audience know what assembler code was, but you had machine language.
We do.
It was a little bit different there, but it's just I'm not asserting the position, but I'm just wondering if we're letting the lack of enrollment of women in technology and computer science be a reason when it may not have to be. But I'm just wondering, what do you think about that?
Actually, then that's a really good question. Personally, I don't have a computer science degree either, and kind of came to technology through the back door. But as things are sort of getting much more consumerized in technology, you know, what are actually the skill sets that people will need in the future? And is it really the hard coding development things, or is it more type of assembly, putting
the integration
things together?
Yeah.
Kind of skills. It's a really interesting question.
Well, we're seeing in startups, and I think there's been a lot written about it, especially in the enterprise software business, that the engineers are taking a starring role again. You talked about, Barbara, the consumerization of the enterprise, and certainly Facebook is a consumer company and also consumerizing the enterprise. Same with Juniper. There's no company on this podium that is not really trying to build very easy to use products, very rapid to deploy products that are coming in through the endpoints of the company versus the CIO. That's where all the new stuff is. And you have to build that stuff. And it's iterated constantly, so it's not just build once, go away. So the starring role of the engineers kind of stays longer than it has before. So there is really a remaking of the startups, and you need a lot of engineering talent, which is extremely competitive right now. I mean, as an example, a large public company called up the other day and said, do you have any struggling companies that have a lot of engineers? We don't care what we do, we'll buy them just for the engineers. So, you know, they're looking for 6 packs of engineers that, you know, can build things. So there is a moment in time here, and this happens frequently in the technology industry, where, you know, the front of the bus has to have a lot of engineering talent. Now, that alone won't make you successful. And certainly we're looking for more natural athletes than the heads-down engineer, which is probably what most of you are looking for. So we're looking for even more of a superstar with greater capability. But right now, we have shortage and scarcity.
And we're reaching overseas, where there is far more engineering talent, you know, in the essence being produced.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about your roles here. And if anybody did not get a chance to talk about the diversity thing, we can weave it in as we go along. You all have big roles, and you mentioned that not everybody's an overachiever and not everybody is a leader, but everybody on this panel is. I would say we don't have any underachievers here. So in your current job, how is your success judged?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll start on that. I think for any sort of public officer, it's obviously the success of the company and how you sort of lead in the organisation, as well as, you know, how you recruit talent, how you'll function, because I'm obviously CFO, so how the function performs within the organisation. There's a lot of that. There's also a lot of, I think, assessment in terms of, how innovative we are with our business partners and the business in terms of ensuring that the strategy is being delivered on. And it's not just measuring after the fact, it's also proactively working with the different parts of the business. So I think there's a whole raft of different things that that we look at in terms of whether, not only am I being successful, but across the organisation's being successful.
What's a typical day like for you? Is there much repetition, or do you get up in the morning and say,
I have a
"Now
lot of
what?"
variety. So I can honestly say I'm never bored. Okay, so lots of different variety depending on the day. It could be, working with investors, doing, IR roadshows, working on earnings calls, working within the organisation on developing the talent strategy for the finance organisation or real estate. We're building a new campus, so how is that going? What's the look and feel of that? What sort of culture do we want in that organisation? Today we did an executive listening post session where we have employees come in, talk about different things. There were 3 of us from executive staff there to actually field any question, didn't matter what it was, so, on what was going on. So a lot of variety, a lot of pretty interesting stuff all the time in terms of different things. Variety of near-term things as well as, strategic longer-term things.
Lori mentioned earlier, and the reason I brought this up is, looking for, the employees at Facebook, even in an individual contributor role, this capability of dealing with change and creating change. So let's talk more about your roles and what drives success for your job.
Well, being in internal IT and at Microsoft, it's a unique position because not only do you deliver IT solutions, you also dog food. And that's what we very much do at Microsoft. We call it dog fooding, is the early versions.
Dog fooding?
Yes.
Do you bark?
We actually do.
Oh my gosh.
When we don't like
tell
it.
anybody.
Yes. We, one thing, before any customer of Microsoft gets our software, it has been tried to death in IT itself. And so we'll take early version. That's very difficult because you're constantly working with different builds, and we're trying it out internally within our own organization. So for example, we've just decided to move our human resources evaluation tools to the cloud. I mean, cloud is one of our biggest strategies. We're moving it to the cloud because what happens is all year round, nothing happens on those tools. And then all at once, 95,000 people go onto it in the last half day to put in their reviews. And that starts to kind of create some volume problems. And then we normally babysit it.
And then they all call you?
That's right, they do, all of them. And we typically would surround it with a lot of extra hardware, software people. We moved it to the cloud. And the elasticity of the cloud will allow us to be able to deal with those spikes. And so how we're judged by, how I'm judged by my boss is really how well did I enable the strategies of Microsoft. My team is responsible for ensuring that we understand what the strategies are and that we look at all the demand that comes in and make the right selection and help our clients make the right selection. We're also judged by how satisfied our clients are with IT. So we actually put out a survey, and it's one of the things I'll be paid on is how happy are our end users with the service that we provided them. And then also, of course, I take very seriously my role as a leader of the team. And how well do we bring our talent along, how much planful talent movement have we done, and how have we grown and developed our people.
So let's peel that back a little bit. You're sitting at the table and, you decide one of these products, the dogs aren't eating the dog food.
Yeah.
It doesn't pass the dog fooding test.
Yes.
Do you have, can you pound on the table and say, hey team, this is not ready for prime time?
Yes, we do.
And what happens when you're the initial naysayer versus the yay-sayer?
Well, you have to realize it is somebody's baby and you're calling it ugly, but yes, we do. But, and I would say there's a good agreement between the product teams and internal IT. I mean, the reason they're giving us their early version is so that we can test it out. And we'll say, look, we tried it in this scenario, it simply isn't working, and you need to do this, this, and this. And they'll take it back. And so there is a cycle of feedback that goes back to them. And there will be a little bit of pride there at times, but that's the whole reason we're there. We're the final, I would say, frontier for a lot of these products. And so that's why a job in IT, not that I'm recruiting, is a great job to have, because you get to do both internal IT and product development in some ways.
So, Barbara, you've got the word labs in your title.
I knew you were going to ask me about that. So, how do I get compensated? It's actually a real, and it was really funny when you mentioned some of the things about campus expansion. I'll get to that as well. It's really across pretty much three different dimensions. One is the area of innovation and what comes out of the various labs sites that we have. We have about 25 in North America. What are the different things that are coming out and how are customers adopting it? The other one is how do we help our on-site sales teams in terms of bringing customers in and helping them close deals? And then a completely different dimension is employee engagement. What are the services that we are providing to the employees on campus to keep them happy, engaged, and make sure they don't wander off to Facebook? So one of the things that we're looking at is also...
Do they just wander off?
There's no wandering.
So a typical day can sort of encompass anything from talking about, we just held a workshop today about how can we keep employees engaged and motivated and what are things that we need to do around there, to what does our campus need to look like 5 or 10 years down the road, and how do we need to expand it, and what does it need to look like to also foster innovation and collaboration amongst the teams and that sort of thing, to speaking in front of a customer or the media, or it's a real variety in the day, and that's something that personally that I really enjoy. To have that breadth in any given day of topics and sort of keep thinking about different things.
Right.
What about you, Lori? How many people do you have to hire in the next week?
Wow. I think for me, it's really, I'm judged by whether or not we have the right people in the right place at the right time. And, do we have the right people to build the products we want to build? To create new things? Are we driving innovation? It's sort of all, if you follow back the chain, it sort of all comes back to how did we recruit and how are we doing in keeping our people. So I think it's those two things. It's basically who we're hiring and how engaged our team is, and it means different things for different people. But I think it is, at the end of the day, if we don't have the person we need to work on X, then somewhere I haven't done my job.
So we, as venture capitalists, we look for big markets, but we also look for great people. And certainly any of you could walk into any venture capital firm in the Valley and pitch a new company. Has the lure of a startup, I know, Lori, you've done a startup before. Have you ever thought about a startup? Or do you think about that on days where the organization feels big?
I have a startup in the family. My husband has a startup, so it's
okay.
I know the dynamics. I know all the ups and downs, so it's kind of nicely evens out a bit.
Me too. My husband. That to him.
Well, and I started in a family startup, so way back when. So I've seen small businesses, and I've seen them grow as well. So yeah.
Well, I've had the amazing opportunity in my previous career of doing startups within a large organization, where you literally were given 6 people and said, go make $6 million,
right.
Something very small, and see how it grows. And it's so satisfying. And, I did take one of those businesses and grow it from 6 people to 850, and you were hiring like 50 people a month. And it's wonderful to do it in a large company, because you're kind of on the side, but you're also well protected, so you have less of those ups and downs. But what you have to realize then is the failure is of a different kind, right? So when you fail in a large company, you really have to master the art of failing well. And there is an art of failing well in a large company, and whether it be a project or a startup. And for me, It is that, the real pivot point is when to pull the plug. Because if you're going to wait till it's gasping for breath, damage is done, and nobody will want to touch the talent that's associated with it.
Sounds like you're ready to be a venture capitalist.
I guess I am. But that's where I think the startup within a large company certainly has its safety net, but it also has a huge, lens on you, and you can come out pretty damaged if you don't know how to fail well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point in terms of how do you provide that, on the one side, the safety net, and what are some of the criteria you're putting in place so that it's clear to everybody involved what are some of the gates that you have to go through. And we've got something internally called the business incubator, where we're, on the one side, giving people a bit of a more of a playing field to start to try very different things that might not fit with our current business model, that are a little bit further off the wall, to kind of also protect them from kind of traditional things or traditional ways of doing things. At the same time, then looking at, reaping some of those innovative ideas that come from there, and how do we then sort of integrate that into the larger portfolio, and then sort of apply some of our more traditional mechanisms to then help it scale, which I think is then another beauty that the sort of startup within the large organization has, that there's already mechanisms and infrastructures in place to really then help the sort of beautiful little idea to really gain mass adoption, which is something that is often quite hard for the real startups to do.
Yeah, and we've had similar experience. So, we entered into the switching market a couple of years ago, and it was a brand new market for us. And the team internally, we created a separate BU for it to actually create that environment. And they brought those products out. They're doing really, really well. And we've also, as a company, as many others here have done, taken dollars and invested outside of the company in smaller ideas that are out there that, may have legs over the longer term. We've also acquired companies in the last 12 months that we did have investments in as well, as things came to fruition. So
we do similar.
Yeah, I think I think that is part of the whole innovation engine. Whether it's inside or outside, or how to keep doing that as a company matures. And we're 15 years old. SAP's older, and obviously Microsoft's a lot older than that. But I think, and even with IBM having their 100-year anniversary, a couple of weeks ago, keeping that innovation engine going over 100 years is quite impressive.
And it's really interesting in terms of how do you have and leverage kind of different channels for innovation, to sort of not fall into the trap to say we're going to all do it internally, and which is a hugely expensive and be very risky, to say, what are the different channels of innovation that we want to leverage between our own teams, partners, customers. How do you create the sort of what we call our ventures arm, which is more investing in companies that are a little further removed from our core, but that still bear some relevance to what we do, to more the incubator side of things. And so it's really sort of how do you keep a portfolio of innovation channels open, and how do you keep them vibrant and sort of bi-directional, especially for as the company grows larger and matures.
So, Lori, when you're in a hyper-growth situation, and you've got a lot of young people at Facebook as well that have young tenures at the company, how do you help people be successful, and how do you tell what the failure points are? And how do you figure out who are the rising stars in sort of the hyper-growth new company?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a lot of it for us is just, keeping the generation that's coming out of school kind of right now over the last 5 or 6 years, and probably for the next 10 years, is really very different from, first of all, it's a very big generation, and it's really very different from the generations that have come before. And, I think what they're largely looking for is impact, flexibility, and autonomy. And we hire people who want those things and who thrive in an environment that provides that. And so I think your first gate is sort of at the door, which is are you hiring the right people and bringing them into the organization? And I think it's very, we tell people on your first day, we expect you to have an impact. You're here to have an impact. There's no take a quarter or two to figure it out. It's like, you joined as an engineer, you're shipping code your very first week. So, people sort of, there's a lot of, we have hackathons, which sort of give people a chance to try out a bunch of things or, build a bunch of things that they've been thinking about. And, very often ideas will rise to the top. And, and sometimes the great ideas are coming from, you kind of see it coming from the same person over and over again. It's like, wow, this is really this one's a gusher. So, it's like, there's just, you see it, you just see it happening. And it's such a transparent organization. And because we've built really strong social connections inside the company, and we're small enough that, we've been able to do that, and we use our own product to do it. It's, there's a lot of visibility and a lot of transparency, and it isn't about, who's the most senior person and what did they bring. It's about, what did you build last Thursday during the hackathon? Mm-hmm. And, when they stand up to describe it, they can't just stand up to describe it. There's no PowerPoint, there are no slides. It's, here's the product that I built. Let me show you the, the demo. Mm-hmm. And I think that really, it drives and surfaces a lot of the great ideas, and it helps you kind of figure out, where you can look next.
We actually do a similar thing in terms of sort of what we call innovation challenges, and no PowerPoint allowed. Yeah. It's you have 6 minutes. If your demo doesn't get the story across in 6 minutes, that's too bad.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's very similar, actually.
So it's very clear that all of you are really great communicators. Were you at the beginning of your career, or did you have someone coach you in public presentations? Did you, was it a natural capability you had? Because certainly that's one for a venture capitalist. I mean, entrepreneurs live or die on the pitch. And you feel sort of bad when you know it's a great idea, but the entrepreneur can't communicate it well. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about these great communication skills and how you got them, mm-hmm. How you honed them, and how you help other people build them.
Well, I can go first on that. I started actually very young. My mother used to put me into elocution contests.
Wow.
Right? And this was in Pakistan, and you would stand up and you would recite in front of a large audience because she thought that was a good thing to do. And then very, very much encouraged me to go into debating. And so I became a public debater and was actually a champion public debater. And that gave me a level of confidence, and then also pushes you. I mean, it's pretty nerve-wracking, like when you're 16 and you're up in front of an audience of 1,000, you pull a topic out of a hat, now you got to speak 4 minutes on it. And then someone's going to do a rebuttal, and you're going to do a rebuttal back. And, it's nervous at first, and it's also very exhilarating. So I guess it was because I sort of got into those situations that I developed the skills to be able to talk on my feet. So I didn't receive a lot of coaching, but when I have teams who do, you say if you just had this one thing, because you're right. You're so right on that. In the end, what you are is represented by your words, right? I mean, that's all that can represent you. And I have found people to benefit greatly from coaching or being videotaped and having it played back to them, for instance.
Boy, have I got an opposite story of that. so I'm completely at the other end. So very, very shy, would not have said boo to anybody. In fact, I was on the debating team, but I was the person writing out the answers and handing the ideas to the person so they would go and speak. So completely the other end. And, I'm good at what I do, and I get it done. Actually, working on the communication, something I've spent a lot of time on, and to me, I think that's part of as an individual, that's what you owe yourself, right? Picking on the things that you can do better at, and actually going off and working on it, and getting the help that you need, whatever it is, whether it's communication skills or whether it's math skills or don't understand a P&L. In my field of work, that would be a bit of a disaster. But if you're in a different, if you're in, if you're an engineer and you don't know which end of the P&L is up, then you need to go off and find out. And so I think it doesn't matter what the skills are. I agree on the communication side, because if you can't lead a team effectively if you're not communicating well. You can't I think, deliver in terms of any of the roles that any of us have unless you get those ideas across. But I think no matter what the skill set, if you, the first path to success is actually identifying that you need to improve it and having that trust circle of people around you who call it out and say, you know what, you might just want to go and get a bit of coaching on that, or you may need to go and take a class on financial acumen. I think that's really important.
Yeah, Robin, that's so amazing. I mean, for those of you who have never listened to an earnings call of a public company, whenever I listen to one, I think of the CFO and how terrifying that might be, how the value of the whole company hangs on your words. So it's interesting the position you have today. Do you get stressed before those calls?
Oh, no. Yeah, I think, I've been around people a lot who are so at ease getting up and talking. And you think, they must be just natural. In Australian, that would be, they must have the gift of the gab, right? So they can talk underwater or anything like that. But the reality is, most people who are good at public speaking actually are terrified. But they overcome the fear and get out and do it. And it's the practice that actually helps. And so from my perspective, whether it's earnings calls, doing a presentation in front of this audience, or it's actually the practice, feeling confident about what you're talking about, knowing what the answers are, on an earnings call, that type of thing that actually helps a lot. So.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up learning that practice makes perfect, so I've practiced a lot of things a lot. And that's the way I develop my team too. If there's someone who wants to be a better speaker or who I know needs to be a better speaker, then I have them go speak instead of my speaking. And I, sit right in front and I take careful mental notes, and afterwards I pull them aside and give them, here's what went really well, you should think about this, you should, think about that. And I ask others to do it for me too. And so after almost every event, I'll have somebody that I can ask, what did you think? How did it go? What would you have done differently? And I think you sort of collect all those bits of feedback and eventually they sink in.
Yeah, mine was a bit of a sink or swim approach. I grew up in Germany where in university you do not get any practice at public speaking or presenting or anything like that. It's all pretty theoretical. And I then jumped across the Atlantic, so not quite as far, and for business school. And I will always remember this, that it was just a sink or swim, All of a sudden, class participation is 30% of your grade. And you either start speaking and communicating and trying to get to the point, or you don't. And I actually went through some of those speaking classes in school, and I was terrified when you first get videotaped and you see yourself presenting on a tape, and it's like, oh my God, don't ever show that to me again. But it was really that kind of, that experience and that feedback that you get. And so throughout my career, I then became a management consultant where, again, you can't be a management consultant if you can't get your point across to the client and if you can't communicate with them. And so it was then just after the sink or swim, just a kind of constant honing. And I think it's one of the most important skills anybody could have, no matter if you're, a CFO or you're in marketing or in HR. It doesn't really matter. I mean, if you can't communicate, then you're really stuck. And I think so for any of my roles that I get in, or whenever what I do with my team, I sometimes probably drive them a bit mad by saying, don't give me the slides, don't give me the nitty gritty. Give me, if you saw me in the elevator or the person you're trying to reach, give them the good old elevator pitch and start your short story first, because that's so much harder to really boil it down to what are you trying to say, maybe in a minute or minute and a half, rather than the 1 hour PowerPoint presentation with 60 slides. And so that's always something I'm trying to through which I'm trying to hone the skill of the team, to say let's make sure we can be really concise in what we're trying to say up front, rather than starting with all the mind-boggling details up.
Yeah, and I would say the technical professions, it doesn't matter whether it's engineering, finance, any of the technical professions, particularly where there's a lot of jargon and all that sort of stuff and acronyms, most of your time, particularly when you're a senior person in that field, you're actually talking to people who know a lot less about that subject matter area than you do. So, in the VC world, I'm sure you're hearing from engineers who are rocket scientists in whatever it is that they're doing, maybe building rockets, I don't know. But And
we
so,
just funded a rocket from NASA Ames. But.
yeah, well, and the reality is they try and get that out there to you to convince you that they know what they're talking about, whereas the reality is it needs to be, tailored for the audience. So, yeah.
So we've got about 5 more minutes before we go into Q&A, and all questions are open. So I know everybody gave a lot of thought into coming here, and since I'm the substitute moderator, I just want to ask each of you, what important message you'd like to leave our audience with tonight. You can take a few minutes to think about this. If you're meeting a young woman, or there's a couple young men here as well, and you would want to say, look, the most important thing I've learned during my career so far is what?
Well, I would say it is to very carefully think about what success means to you. I often talk to individuals because I mentor a lot of individuals, and when I say what is success, and they will quickly take the attributes that society has sent to us through the media. The big job, lots of money, the big car. I said, is that really what success means to you? And if it does, that's okay, right? Because those are good attributes as well. But what does success mean to you? And I want you to sit back and think about what it means, that at the end of your life, are you really thinking, was I successful? And it meant this, 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 and this. And then once you've done that, you want to align every action you take to the ambitions that are articulated in your success story. Because then every choice you make will be guided by that. And there is no way that you will not be successful if you define what success means to you versus letting society decide what success means for you.
Yeah, I would look at it in terms of what are you passionate about, and really knowing what really gets you motivated and excited in the morning. Because that has if you're pursuing a job that doesn't give you that, then, there's no point to it. If it's not something that really gets you personally motivated, it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. Mm-hmm. It's really about, do you know what really gets you excited? What are you passionate about? And does your job allow you to do that, to keep you going? Because otherwise, it's really hard to be productive and energized, at your job.
I do think it's really important to do something you love.
Yeah.
And that can be lots of different things. So it's not necessarily measured by rungs on a ladder. It's, at every juncture, if you stop and think, is this something I'm really going to love? Then, you'll do well at it because you love it, and it will open another door. So I think we spend a lot of time working.
Exactly.
So if you don't love it, it's really unfortunate. And, I think over time, the opportunity costs become higher for you as other things are happening in your life. And, when I've seen my girlfriends drop out of the workforce, it's because they didn't love the job that they had at the moment they had to make the decision about whether to go back to work after maternity leave. And I think if you are in a position where you don't love your job at that moment, you will not go back because it's just not worth it. So I think, I think the people I've seen who really love what they're doing are outliers in their areas. And I think that's, it depends how you define success, but I think that's one way to just think about the path, not, how do I get to the next rung, but am I doing something that I love?
Yeah, I think it's a very consistent theme. I mean, my whole motto is, live life to the fullest. You only have one of them, most of us anyway. So, do what it is that's really driving your passion, and whether that's work or not work, or, who said, that if you're doing what you love, it's not work anyway. So I think that, really knowing what that is, getting in touch with yourself and making sure that it's really what you want to do. And the other thing is keep investing in yourself. Again, whether it's, what you do at work or at home, if you're not putting the investment into yourself, then no one else is going to, right? So, and whether that's getting help with a particular skill set that you need, or whether that's getting backing for a particular idea that you want to take to market, unless you're prepared to invest in it, it's not going to, no one else will. No one else will back you unless you back yourself. So having the confidence and courage to do what you think you really want to do, or what you believe in.
Well, this hour has gone by very fast.
Very fast.
And, none of the questions were set up, so I learned a lot about each and every one of you. So before we go to Q&A, I'd like to ask for a round of applause for our panelists. We have mics on either side, and you can address particular panelists or however you want to do this. We're captive.
I wanted to go back to the diversity issue we were talking about earlier. So a few weeks ago, I read an article in the New York Times about female MIT professors and how they feel about their jobs. And something that struck me as very interesting is that they mentioned that in industry, women are expected to have a very narrow personality range. If they're, a little gentler, they're considered too soft. If they're a little more aggressive, they're considered too aggressive, too bitchy. I'm sorry for my language. And so this seems like a cultural defect, a societal defect. And what do you suggest we do to address something like this? Because I find it very rare that men are considered ever too soft or too aggressive.
So I can help, I think, with that. I think one of the things you've got to do, doesn't matter who you are, you've got to be true to yourself. You obviously shouldn't curse in public or all that sort of stuff. But I think you've got to be true to who you are. You can't put on a personality of somebody else. That would feel very weird and very tiring for that matter, because if you're not true to who you are, then you're sort of putting a facade on every day, and that's incredibly tiring. So I think, in terms of personality, changes, all of that sort of stuff, that's incredibly difficult to do. So I don't know what the article was about, but I'm not sure that I would agree with that. Look at this room. I didn't comment on the diversity piece before, but look at this room. I don't think we have a diversity issue, right? So I think that, and it comes back to what you were saying before, I think the more opportunities we have of working from the inside. I'm a very big Trojan horse type person, not a virus person, but from a management philosophy perspective, you can't change things unless you're in there. On the inside, changing things. So the more people we have that look like us, that are actually in the management positions, in the leadership roles, the more it's going to feel normal that we're there, right? And the more that we can actually influence what's going on in making those talent decisions, bringing that diversity of thought, bringing that whole perspective into the different leadership parts of any organisation. So maybe I'm just an optimist, but I actually think over time it will fix itself because we will change it as we're in the inside. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think the solution really boils down to, and this is what you're saying, is critical mass.
Yeah.
When you have critical mass of females, then the attributes become the norm versus the corner case. And that's what, if we could address the systemic barriers and increase the amount of leadership we have, then it becomes just quite normal.
Yeah.
And you'll have.
On our leadership team right now at Juniper, we have 5 out of 12 that are women, 4 out of 12 that are women. That we don't have a problem with diversity. Seriously, in the organisation, sure. Does engineering look the same way as the executive table looks? No. Should we be working on that? Absolutely, right? But I think we have a role to play in changing that as much as anybody else does, and I feel pretty good about that. I think we can, we will.
And it's also the fact that it's not the one size fits all.
Right.
There's different roles with different skills that are required, and I don't think it's an either or. It's very much the question of how do the things that are required are changing. We talked about this earlier. There's a whole new generation coming in that actually has much less of a gender divide, quote unquote, than current or previous generations might have had, and it's becoming much more normal for women to be in the workforce and to be amongst the the executive ranks. And it's the kind of what can we all do to kind of keep the momentum going in terms of the talent decisions that we're making, the talent recommendations that we're making, the influencing over what are the talents that are bubbling to the top, and do it, to your point, do it from within.
I mentioned earlier that the generation that's coming out of school right now has really no division between their professional persona and their personal persona. And I think for an organization that has a lot of these people, it's very much about bringing your authentic self to work, whatever that is, because it's out there, and it's all about kind of sharing and kind of socializing and building social connections, even at work, the same way that my generation, you really didn't do at work as much. And I think it's just changing. And I think that the whole mindset actually is changing around bring your authentic self to work. And that leaves room for, I think, a lot of diversity that wasn't there maybe even a little while ago. So I think there's actually probably heading in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about bring your authentic self to work, and then look at the outcomes. So what is the outcome that you want through the authentic self, and be striving to do things like impact and influence. It doesn't mean you have to be aggressive. It doesn't mean you have to be loud. It means being very deliberate about being authentic to yourself and having the outcome, for instance, of impact and influence, having the outcome of dealing with ambiguity and demonstrating that, being yourself. And so if you are also outcome focused within your own personality, I think you'll get I think women in general will be able to get the right stereotype, because that is what they were talking about, is the stereotype.
It was a great question. Thank you so very much. We've got one over here.
Yeah, you are all very wonderfully inspiring, so thank you for sharing your views, because I think they're amazing. And one thing that I think really resonated with the audience was the point made about the system has to change. And a system, of course, is not a living creature, which means people drive culture and people drive the system. So I'd really love to hear from every one of the panelists, if you wouldn't mind, about what your philosophy is in mentoring and how you go about mentoring. I know you touched upon it just a bit, Shal, but I'd love to hear everybody's perspective on that.
So, I mean, I've been actually, I think mentoring is one of the best things we can do in an organization, outside of, all the processes and the system, because it is, at the end of the day, about people and how we share our experiences. Personally, I've been on both sides of the mentoring equation, and no matter if I'm a mentee or a mentor, I always learn a ton. And in terms of when I'm a mentor, the kind of questions that get thrown at me, where sometimes I think, oh my God, I haven't really thought through that much through that question, and it's a really good one, and I learn an incredible amount through that. So I actually think this is something that we need to do much more of. In terms of mentoring, because it also helps incredibly at breaking down some of the internal barriers and silos. It helps people create new relationships, which then are incredibly important, especially in a large company, to kind of, figure out where do you want to work next, and what are the kinds of things you would want to do there. So it also opens people's eyes about what opportunities exist. And so I think that's really a core element to drive a whole variety of things from a people perspective, from a culture perspective.
I'd say I really believe in real relationships through real work. So I've seen less success, and I've experienced less success myself when people are paired with strangers. So when it's sort of a more artificial, we're going to build a mentoring program, and we're going to take this person over here and match them with this person over here. I haven't seen it work. And so for me, it's really more about looking around and thinking about who are the people that you have real relationships with, who really know your work and know you, so that they can give you real feedback, and they can look for opportunities and help you think through things, and can be a coach when you need it. And I think increasingly these are not unidirectional relationships. I think it's very much I have as many kind of coaches at Facebook who, sort of, I think, probably first thought I might coach them, but honestly, I probably get more value out of those relationships than they do. And so I think, kind of just changing the mindset around where it comes from.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that I've had experience on both formal mentoring situations that have worked really well. I've had some not so great experiences on that front, and also just the personal interaction. I think it does come back to connecting with different people, and whether it's you acting as the coach or the other way around, it's always bidirectional in terms of what you learn through that experience, irrespective of which side of the table you're on. But I also think, it comes back to the theme I was talking about before. If there's something that you don't know how to navigate, or you have a particular skill in and can help other people with, paying that forward is a huge thing. So I think mentoring is an often used word to cover a lot of different things, both informal but learning from others, I think, is the key to everything. And it doesn't matter whether it's a formal or informal relationship. I think it's a great thing, right?
Well, and I would add to that and say, given that the question came in the context of fixing the system, one thing that I personally do, and I mentor deliberately both men and women, is make sure that I mentor people that I feel I can believe in. Because I will not only be their mentor, I will be their sponsor. And there is, the mentor advises and the sponsor pushes for. The sponsor is ambitious for you. So if you're lucky enough to get a sponsor, they will be ambitious for you. Of course, the ultimate sponsor is your mom, right? She's always ambitious for you. And in terms of advancing careers, if you're mentoring people who you believe in, you have absolutely no hesitation when names are put forward for high potential programs, for promotions, for interesting roles, to say, have you thought of? And that's something I would ask everyone to consider, is when you're picking a mentor, is that person going to be your mentor, or are they also going to be your sponsor?
Yeah, I think for us as venture capitalists, the majority of times our executive teams are doing the job for the first time CEOs, the first time CROs, the first time CMOs. So we're dealing with raw talent, and what we like to tell our executives is you should practice standing naked in front of the mirror at night. Because really the kind of relationship that Lori's talking about suggests a level of openness, trust, and confidence in not only, trying to achieve, but really being confident about what you don't know, and sort of self-assessing where you have room to learn. Mm-hmm. And that's where we see failure the most with our young executives, is that they don't want to acknowledge that they might actually have to hire someone to fill in a gap versus trying to be perfect all the time. So whether you're a man or a woman, I think it is challenging to stand naked in front of that mirror at least once a week.
Hi. The panel's spoken today about the search for talent and also the diversity issue. I'm interested to know from everyone on the panel whether you have had any involvement in the past in going into schools, perhaps speaking to students and inspiring them to go on to bigger and better things.
Yeah. I've done it just twice in the last probably 6 weeks or so. Both to groups of girls in middle school and high school. And I think, and actually in very different communities. So I think it's, I think it's really important for them to see role models, so that they can, I think it's hard to, I think you achieve what you visualize for yourself. And if you have trouble visualizing it because you haven't seen anybody else do it, it's very hard. So I think it's, I feel like it's something that I owe back, is to be able to provide that to someone. Even if it's just a couple of people in an audience, you sort of think, oh, wow, maybe I can actually do that. I think the voice in your head is more important than anything else, and if we can help influence the voice in someone's head, then, that's a job well done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here. I've done it as well, and
Again, it's one of those bi-directional things where, yes, the main purpose is to kind of share your experience with, a group of, young girls or young people. And at the same time, my experience, you always get an incredible amount also back, just by the sheer questions that get thrown at you, which, sort of send you back to when you were that age. And it's like, yeah, how did I think about this? And I find that tremendously rewarding.
Mm-hmm. It's also energizing. I mean, I find, because I've done it as well, just that particularly, it depends on the age, but particularly in that middle school sort of age when they're still in touch with the world and not sort of anti everything, it's quite energizing to sort of be in front of them and having questions thrown at you, particularly, with a different accent, in front of different people. I find it pretty good.
And you get an idea of the myths that are out there. I mean, I stood in front of a group of grade 8, and this is about 1999, and I can still remember one young person telling me I'd never go into technology. As I was writing on the whiteboard, why would someone go into technology and why wouldn't they? And I said, why not? And he says, well, my back will ache all the time. I'm going to be hunched over a computer. So I'm not going into that. So it was kind of interesting perspectives.
Yeah, one of the other generational changes, and I'm sure Lori will agree with this, is there is not a college graduate today that has not, during their undergraduate years, also done community service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Even college rankings today are based on what percentage of the students perform hours of community service. So it's creating a gap between those of us who went to college and just went to college. And the new employee at companies really is expecting that they have jobs and they do service at the same time, mm-hmm. and they have families and do it all. So it even puts a higher pressure on us to look at the time we have and figure out how we give back to our communities, because it is being baked into every 21-year-old that graduates and joins our companies. They expect that companies will have programs for community services, that there might be foundations they can work with, that there'll be events around community service. And that expectation comes back to us as leaders in industry, that we have to do the same thing, and we have to find time for that. I've spoken at 7 campuses in the last 120 days, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts. Not that, don't get me wrong, but not that I want to take up your job or anything, but I would like to know, how did you get there? What all things you did which was different than others, that you are so successful where you are? Maybe I can derive some formula for myself and, learn out of that.
So Shala, we left you on the debate team.
Yes.
What country were you in then?
I was in Pakistan at that point in time and made my way to Canada. And, if I were to sort of do my quick synopsis of how I got to where I am, I started off as a developer and thought I was like the best thing since sliced bread, because I certainly knew how to develop code. And yet I had my eye on an executive position. So one thing I will say is I always knew where I wanted to get. I just didn't know how to get there. I just truly didn't, but I kind of knew where I knew where I wanted to get. And I had a mentor who said something to me that was very meaningful. So I was talking to him, and he says, Shala, you need to become the business manager to the CIO. I said, why would I become the business manager? In these veins are bits and bytes, not dollars and cents. Why would I become a business manager? And he said, the words I remember to this day, and this is like 20 years ago, he said, you know how to do IT, but you don't know how to run IT. And so I became a business manager on faith and hated the first 3 months. Though I have a business degree, and so it was not that difficult. But what I finally understood, and this was at a time when IBM was going through its almost bankruptcy back in the early 90s, that actually if you combine the knowledge of IT and the business degree, you could actually make certain outcomes happen. And then I went through actually and became a finance manager, a controller, went into network services, and as IBM was growing its services business, I was right there and managing and becoming an executive in those businesses, and then landed up in Microsoft. But I have done HR, I've done finance, I've done services, I've done IT, and so there have been a number of things. And I think breadth helps. So if you were asking specifically, I would say having a resume that reflects multidisciplines, I found very helpful to getting to the goal that I wanted.
And
Yeah,
Robin?
I'll echo that actually. Where I mean, I started my actually very first job was in banking, believe it or not, and then I went on into consumer marketing, where I spent my first couple of months actually doing ethnographic research on teens, which was fancy speak for hanging out with teens for a whole summer and figuring out what they're doing and how that might be relevant for a company like Coca-Cola. So, and I wasn't getting paid for it. So, but jokes aside, and then I went into management consulting, where you learn a whole host of other skills, and you get exposed to other industries and other challenges, and you have to be sort of quick in terms of sort of understanding what's new in the industry that you have your new project in, and actually came to the IT industry a little bit through the back door by actually having the chance in management consulting to apply a lot of things that I had learned in consumer marketing and apply them to more technically focused companies. So and that sort of multidisciplinary kind of background between in my case marketing, consulting, some finance, then I also went into product management and solution management. I think that sort of breadth kind of really helps you understand a business more holistically, which then can set you onto a certain path.
Robin, did your family expect you to join the family business?
Actually, no, the opposite. So
They kicked you out?
Well, pretty much. So my brother actually was the one who was anointed to the family business. No, so I actually, as Anne was saying, my parents had a business. They started the business. I worked in the business. I actually managed it while summer vacations from school and university. So I was always very focused on business and all that sort of stuff. It was actually a garage, so a garage with workshops and that type of thing. So that's why I loved cars. And so I actually was at Anderson's for a period of time after I'd got my degree in economics. And then went to Toyota because they rang and I said, yes. Car company. Ferrari had rung, it might have been even better. But so I ended up at Toyota for about 8 years. And I think, more specifically on your question, one of the things that I think more than just any discipline or any particular path is actually curiosity. Curiosity about how things work, why they work the way they work, and not getting fobbed off with an answer like, how does electricity work? Well, it just does. But actually going through and understanding how, particularly for a finance professional that ends up being CFO, you've got to keep going after the answer until you're satisfied that you know what it is, right? So, and so I think, from an attribute perspective, that's something that I've always had. I'm Robin with a Y, and the reason I have a Y is because I'm always asking questions. And it's true. Even today, I mean, a couple of my team members are here and they're nodding, right? So it's, well, why does it have to be that way? Or why is it that way? And how can we do it better? Or what else can we do in that situation?
And why is always easier than no, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's why before it's no sometimes. So, yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would just echo, I say this all the time actually internally at Facebook, which is, I think it's a jungle gym, not a ladder. I think it's about collecting experiences, and it isn't always about the next move up to the next title. It's sometimes just about kind of broadening your experience set, your skill set, your perspective on things, and branching out a little bit. And it's, you might find yourself sort of, as I described myself to Anne earlier, an accidental tourist in something. But, you just sort of never know where it's going to take you. So I think it's, it's very much kind of serendipity along the way.
Yeah, and I think, linking back to the question about the schools, when I'm talking to, kids who are in school and stuff, the reality is they're going to change their minds 47 times before maybe even they get to college, let alone when they're going through college, as to what it is they do. And then once they've actually done something in college, got their major, by the time they finish their career, they're going to have, 10 different changes probably. So I think, going back to being authentic, making sure you're following your passion, whatever the path is, doesn't really matter, as long as you're collecting the things along the way that you need for the ultimate role that you might aspire to, or the next role that you aspire to, that type of thing.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Oh, wow, I'm ending it. I hate to put us back to such a gender-specific place, but it's a Women in Tech Roundtable, so voila. I'm not sure if any of you are mothers. It's not in your bio, but I particularly one of the things Lori said about people she knew dropping out of the workforce after maternity leave because it wasn't necessarily something they were passionate about. I feel like that's also true for women who do things that they are passionate about because they somehow have to make a pivotal choice at motherhood about whether or not they're going to be a good mother or a good boss or a good whatever it is that they do. So, I kind of wanted to get a little bit of your thoughts on that. Like, did you have nannies? Do you have nannies? Are your kids in daycare? Were they in daycare? Do you feel guilty about it? Do you? I mean, there are a lot of things as a person who's younger in my career, but I see all these amazing women that I work with who somehow manage to do it all, and I can't even balance my own life right now, and I'm only responsible for me. So
Shala, you could turn it over to your daughter.
I could indeed.
Did you want to add something? The mic's.
I'd like to hear what you have
Let's give Nadia the mic. I know you've been bursting at the seams and proud of your mom tonight. So.
Well, maybe you could first answer and then I could give my perspective.
Okay, well, I mean, certainly I don't think I was the perfect mother, but I did not give up on my career. I was very, very focused and did get the help because I didn't think I could be a super mom and do it all, right? So what I did was I made an investment at a time when I was not making a lot of money, when she was born 27 years ago, and got a nanny and got a wonderful person to help. And I also had a wonderful husband who also helped at home, and so that was one of the solutions I had. And basically, I was turning my entire salary over to her. And there were times that because by the time you paid her salary, this was in Canada, workman's compensation, the Canadian pension plan, etc., my entire take-home went. But I was investing in the future, and it paid off. But I would tell you, it was something I really loved doing, much as I loved my child. And so now surprise me, Nadia.
Okay, well, from the child's perspective...
First of all, Nadia, introduce yourself and what you're up to these days.
Okay, so my name's Nadia. I'm the daughter of this lovely woman. And because of her efforts in her life, I now work at Google as a social media specialist.
I don't know if that's successful for me.
But which is funny because today we were having a conversation as I took her for lunch, and she asked me, what is success to you? And we have very now different views of success. So yes, I'm in success right now, and we're agreeing on that. But my vision of success has skewed a bit recently, as I've discovered more as you grow. Back to being a child of, and growing up in a household we had a live-in nanny, which was our family too. And I think I remember Mom just bawling when we had to get rid of one nanny, and she was family to me. But to be really honest with you, my mom was always there for us. She would always come to events when she could. There were some events that she couldn't come to, and I would, why didn't you come see me play drums? That's not cool. And she said, well, I'm in New York, and there was instances when she was in New York and would fly back on the weekends at IBM. Was it at IBM? And she was at IBM, and she went there in Westchester or something like that, and she'd fly back every weekend just to be with the family. But one thing I remember growing up and reading an article, I was maybe 12, maybe 14, and there was an article, and it was about her, and I was reading it, and one thing that it said was that for me to be where I am today and concentrate on my career and love my career, you do have to give up some things, and that's why we did get help. And at that time, that kind of hurt me that I had to read, or I read that your career in a way was more important to you than being at home with the family. But I mean, I understand now. I mean, I got to go to snowboard camp. I got to go on vacation every year. I got to do my master's in digital media. So
She got her sports car.
No, but the great thing about how she raised me is it was almost business-like. Anything you want, give me a proposal. Show me the value. Why that I'm at Microsoft? Do you need this Apple computer? Why I don't get it. You need to prove it to me. And then look at me. I've learned so much from her. I'm sitting here right now. I'm like, oh my God, you've become your mother. And yeah, I think that if you just go about it like how you want to do it, and just kind of be there for your kids and keep your ears open for them. And she was always there. I mean, I once got sick and really sick. I was really sick, and I went to my dad, and I blew up in hives. I was like, the hives, I think are like this big. The hives were like this big, and I was in the hospital, and she flew right home, and she was there for me. And so she was able to do both. And, there might have been struggles and things like that, and, there might have been, gaps in a relationship, but, we're at a great point in our relationship. And, I'm doing great, she's doing great, and we're all just great. So that's kind of what it is.
Any closing comments? I guess this is our one question about life-work balance. So a couple quick comments on that as we close up.
I have a very young child, so I'm fairly new to motherhood. He's just a little bit over 2, and it is. You have to make some choices, and you make choices on a daily basis. Where sometimes there's events in the evening that I would love to go to. Where sometimes I opt out and say, I really want to be at home and spend time with my son. On the other side, I didn't want to give up my career either, because I think actually it makes me a more balanced person, and hopefully with that a better mother. Tonight I can't be there. And, you have to have it's all about teamwork. You have to have a team in place, where my husband is an entrepreneur. He's a little bit more flexible, so he can step in here and there. If you work in a large company, you don't have all that much flexibility, even though I have to say I'm fortunate that I can take some flexibility in the times that I work, and, some work from home and things like that. You have to have some sort of, infrastructure in place, and, and try to balance it out. And, it's tough, I'm not going to lie about it. There's moments where it's like, what, I'd much rather be at home now. And there's moments where it's like, what, it's good to be here and at work. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important decisions I made for my career actually was choosing the right partner. I think, honestly, I think if you choose the wrong partner, you will make very different decisions. And, we're definitely, my husband and I are definitely 50-50 at home.
Yeah, same here.
Someone gets sick and has to go to the doctor, 50-50 that he'll go or I'll go. And I think that really takes a lot of the pressure off me and allows me to do a lot of the things that I wouldn't otherwise be able to do. But I think it's really, and it's important. And it's also important on the hard days, and there are a lot of them, when, to have someone else say to you, it's a hard day, tomorrow will be better, And I think there are also some things that you just have to let go. My house is not always clean. The laundry is not always done. I do actually, I am admitting this, will occasionally take a shirt out of the hamper to put on a child in the morning. It's like lots of cereals are fortified. It's okay for dinner. It's like, I think if you just ask yourself what really matters, it's sort of those aren't the things that matter. But if you make those the things that matter, you're going to drive yourself nuts. So I think it's just, I think it's those two things for me, is sort of realistic expectations and having a partner who carries half.
Yeah, so I have 2 kids, 18 and 23. And as we speak, they're doing a road trip up the coast of Australia. So they're doing well. And, I would echo, there are lots of different choices that you have to make. And, I chose to do what I do and have the family, and my words are, there is no such thing as balance in life. It's about integrating the different things that you want to do in this great full life that you have, and then make it work, right? I'm going to steal a line from one of my colleagues at work where she says, apart from love, outsource everything else. and I think it's fabulous, right? Because that's exactly what you do. I mean, you do have the nannies, you do have the extra help, and the other thing, someone mentioned the word guilt. Get rid of it. Don't even think about the guilt. You've got to do what's right for you and your family and work and everything else, and make those decisions. And I think everything else will take care of itself.
Well, on my team, I've asked all of my team members to come up with a work-life balance plan, because what we first thought was, because it's a common question that comes up, and it's not just women, it's men as well. So what I would tell you is, for every child there is born, there is a father who cares, right? And they struggle as much with raising the child as the mother does. I personally have many on the team who also, they may not articulate it as much, but they certainly struggle about, and they want to be with the child as well. And so everyone has come up with a work-life balance plan, because it means different things to different people. But picking up on the guilt point, I think it's very important as employees of an organization to give yourself permission at times to do things for yourself. And sometimes we don't give ourselves permission. Right? I mean, thinking, oh, we really cannot leave at 4 o'clock. Yes, you can, right? I mean, because if you have the work-life integration, you're not cheating the company, right? And so that's where having that plan, giving yourself permission, and feeling okay about it. Lots of people have done it, and you can do it too.
So on behalf of the Churchill Club, and with special thanks to Microsoft, but amazing thanks to Barbara, Lori, Robin, and Shala for sharing so much about their careers and about themselves. And I think our big tip of the night is, other than love, outsource everything.
Thank you. On behalf of the Churchill Club and our audience, I'd like to thank our speakers and Anne for spending your evening with us. This has been a memorable and inspiring experience for us, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well. As a symbol of our thanks, we're pleased to present you with your very own high-fashion Churchill Club t-shirt. Please wear it in good health. Thanks again to Microsoft for their support, and our co-hosts, Anita Borg Institute, Ostia, and Whitty. And you've been a terrific audience. Thank you so very much. Drive safely and have a good night.